Hey friends, Sheila here, and today I am sharing 3 things I wish I had known before I headed out on my first solo bike tour. In 2019, I headed over to Scotland, and over the course of 3.5 months, I ended up cycling across Europe from Scotland to Croatia. It made me absolutely fall in love with biking, and now, 3 years later, basically all I want to do is bike tour and chat about bike touring. Clearly I loved it, but I had so many fears and hesitancies before I headed out. I was super excited about the idea of heading off on a bike tour, but a lot of it was new to me. I had never traveled on my own, I had never done a bike tour before, I had never camped on my own, I had never done wild camping. It was gonna be a lot of firsts, and there were a lot of things that felt quite intimidating. And so I thought about it for a long time before I actually booked a flight. And so this video today is a bit of a note from present day Sheila to 3 years ago Sheila, with a little bit of wisdom and the things I wish I had known that might have made heading out on my first solo bike tour feel a little less scary. And this is of course by no means prescriptive, everyone is different. These are just some little discoveries I've had for myself that I wanted to share today. So let's dig into the 3 things I wish I knew before my first solo bike tour. Number 1 is that fears are information. I found this to be a very helpful reframe for myself as someone who deals with plenty of fears and anxieties. I like to remember that our body's primary goal is to keep us alive, and it's understandable that the idea of heading off into the wilderness alone is going to be a little bit of an intimidating thought for our bodies. But our fears are just information. They can guide us and support us, but they don't have to control us. As an example, when I decided to head out on my first solo bike tour, I was pretty nervous. There were plenty of fears in my wee brain. But since then, someone explained to me the tight link between excitement and fear, and how our bodies can sometimes perceive them very similarly. And so when we think we're afraid, we might actually be feeling excitement. I certainly believe that to be true in that particular case. I was probably 95% excited, 5% afraid. But the fear was very loud, and that was hard to navigate. But ultimately, I talked myself through it, and I assured myself that if it wasn't the right fit, if I really hated bike touring, I could just head home, but it was worth a shot. And obviously I loved it because I'm still here yammering on about it 3 years later. So that's an example of a moment where I said, thank you, fear, but I'm going to do it anyway. On the other side of things, I did once have an experience on my bike tour where I got to where I was gonna spend the night, I was ready to set up my tent, and I just didn't feel good. Something in my gut said, I just don't feel safe here. I don't know why, I just don't. And in that instance, I trusted that deep wisdom and I said, okay, and I got back on my bike and I hustled my way to the nearest town and found a spot to sleep where I felt safer. And then there's also times where I honor and work with my fear. For example, I've come to learn that I feel kind of anxious when I'm biking in the evening, especially if I don't know where I'm gonna sleep. You know how when the sun starts setting, there starts to get a bit of a chill in the air and there's this dimness to the environment? If that's happening while I'm looking for a spot to sleep for the night, I do not feel good. So I learned to honor that fear and to look for spots to sleep earlier in the day. From these examples, I think it's pretty clear that there's no one-size-fits-all answer to listening to our fears. I think of it rather as a bit of a delicate dance, but learning to value and work with and navigate our fears, I think is a really valuable skill. In summary, the first thing I would want myself 3 years ago to know is that fears are not necessarily bad, they're just information. And learning to listen to and work with them more is going to be a lifelong skill and practice. That brings me to the second thing I wish I had known, which is, you'll figure it out. I feel like before I headed out on my first solo bike tour, my brain went a mile a minute with every possible thing that could go wrong. Like I said, it was a whole lot of firsts for me. I'd never bike toured, I had never camped on my own, and ultimately, you don't know how you're gonna react in a situation until you're actually in it. I feel like there is great value in preparing to the best of our abilities, making sure that I packed the things that would serve me best, that I understood maybe the road conditions and the wildlife and the social environment and some of those things I might encounter when going to a new place. But ultimately, we can't prepare for everything, and I was pretty surprised at how well I managed to just figure it out. In my day-to-day life at home, I would say I'm pretty indecisive. When I need to make a decision, I tend to hum and haw and look at all the different options and think and sleep on it. It takes me forever. But on a bike tour, I am just shockingly decisive. And I think part of that is that when you're biking on your own, you have to be. You have to be self-sufficient and you have to figure it out yourself. For instance, I remember one time when I was trying to get to a town to sleep and I just wasn't going to get there in time, I realized I was going to need to wild camp, and I just turned into action planning mode. I was like, is that a good spot to sleep? No. Is that a good spot to sleep? No. Is that a good spot to sleep? Maybe. Let's check it out. And I checked it out. I looked at my environment. I sat there. I got a feel for if I felt good. I set up my tent. I made myself some food. I did all the things I needed to do. So it turns out that even if I am somewhat indecisive in my regular life, when I'm on a bike tour, I always figure it out. And the third thing I wish I had known is that people are unbelievably kind. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the news we see is about all the terrible things that happen and the terrible things that people do. And because of that, I think the world and other people can seem really scary, and the idea of heading off on your own can feel really overwhelming. And I'm not naive, I know that bad things happen, but what I was really surprised by on my bike tour was just how much kindness I was met with. I had strangers inviting me into their home for the night, making me food, cutting me grapes from their garden, filling up my water bottles, offering me breakfast, other cyclists asking if I wanted to ride with them. It just really helped me see that there is so much kindness in the world and so many great people. And I know that bad things can still happen, and I also know that I was privileged on that tour because I was a young, cis, able-bodied white person traveling around Europe. So I can't speak to what it's like for everyone in every place, but I can say that for myself and from the many, many, many stories I have heard from other bike tourers, there is a lot of kindness and support to be found in this world. And although myself from 3 years ago was so scared at the idea of heading off on my own, I ended up being supported by the most incredible people who were strangers when I first met them, and it ended up being such incredible supports to me along the way. Alright friends, those are the 3 things I wish I had known before heading out on my first solo bike tour. She's gotta make an appearance every time, you know? If you are dreaming about or planning your first solo bike tour, I would love to know if any of this resonated with you. And if you are a seasoned bike tourer, please leave your experiences in the comments below. Did you have any hesitancies before heading out on your first adventure? And what was it like when you finally decided to do it? That's it for this one. I am wishing you wonderful, safe, joyous adventures of your own. Have a good one. Bye.